Greetings sailors and welcome to my first warships video since leaving the program. This is going to be my compromise, I guess, as to how I continue to earn a living, and I freely and fully admit that it is absolutely a compromise. As I alluded to in the video I did, I am basically going to do other content of my own, but I'm still going to feature view replays, and particularly Patreon replays, because there is a whole tier of my Patreon setup where basically it's a kind of a priority strand of my videos, as it were. As I also alluded to, you know, I've been in this situation before when I at first kind of quit doing World of Tanks content myself because I wasn't enjoying it so much, and obviously this was post me having left as a World of Tanks community contributor, and then I just decided I didn't even want to do view replays anymore, and that definitely hurt me. So I'm being a bit more cautious this time. And the difference, one of the differences between this situation and that one as well, is I do still genuinely enjoy playing World of Warships. It's just the decisions that go on behind the scenes that are causing me bafflement and confusion and disappointment. Whereas with World of Tanks I had genuinely stopped enjoying playing it some time ago, so it was a less difficult decision, if I can put it that way. So, on to this replay. This is Chaser 617 on the NA server in the Eitel Friedrich, and this is actually a 10.6 replay, meaning it is prior to the reworked slash buffed manual secondaries skill, which is certainly something that the Eitel Friedrich in particular would benefit from. Once upon a time, before the CV rework, before the AA rework, and this actually came out really not long before those things happened, this was basically released with the premise of it having, yes, good secondaries, but also really good AA for tier 6. That kind of isn't a relevant thing for this ship anymore, and hasn't been for a while, but it does still have good secondaries for tier 6. You can get it out to, I think, like 8.6 kilometers, something like that, if you build for the best possible range. The major downside with that is that it comes at the cost of main battery accuracy, but at least being a German battleship, you don't have to spec into IFHE to get the penetration on the secondary guns. Even the 105mm secondaries that this has still have, I think, 26mm of penetration. And this is a mix of 105mm and 150mm. So when you get to the ships like the Scharnhorst and the Bismarck and the Tirpitz that have 128mm as well, then obviously with those in the mix, you know, you also don't have to worry about IFHE. I don't really know where I was going with that point, to be honest. But what will be of benefit is that reworked secondary skill where accuracy now ramps up over time. And I've yet to try it with the Eitel Friedrich myself, but I have tried it a bit with the Scharnhorst in Narai, and I think I've tried one game with the Tirpitz in randoms with that particular setup as well. Although, to be honest, I still prefer to favour the accuracy of my main guns. But it would be interesting to repeat this experiment, and I might even try myself with some Eitel Friedrich games and see how it does with the better accuracy. It's definitely helping Chaser here that he's top tier. If he was bottom tier, or even if this was a tier 7 game, he probably wouldn't get away with being as aggressive as he has been. And even so, he's taken a lot of damage. He made a very, very aggressive early move there, and it could have gone badly. Fortunately for him, it hasn't. And although he has been rather badly damaged, he's still very much alive and kicking, and they have secured this side of the map, which they really do need, because half the team is dead and they have lost the other 2/3 of the cap points. So they're going to need to push out from here in strength, not get caught in a crossfire, and hope that the enemy response isn't sufficiently coordinated. Because if it is, if they do go out one by one and get picked off, then this game is definitely going to be a loss. So all that's left to immediately deal with is that Alba, who is almost certainly going to try and drop some torps. It's a nice broadside that he's got to shoot at there. I mean, the Alba's at a slight angle, but these guns are not particularly reliable, and I'm going to guess he does not have the accuracy module. I'm going to guess he does have the secondary module, which gives you a bit of extra range, and I think buffs the accuracy a bit as well, isn't it? Like 20% for both of those? I can't remember. I know the one that you get at the high tiers is that buffs the rate of fire as well, but yeah, it's always a big choice to make in a battleship if you're considering going secondaries. Is it worthwhile sacrificing that extra main battery accuracy that you can get, because the what is it, 7%? That can make a fairly significant difference. It's a big enough number to be noticeable. And there are times when there are numbers involved in this game where it doesn't necessarily make a noticeable difference on a per battle basis. When you look at things like, let's say a ship gets bumped 0.1 in its sigma, for example, which is part of what dictates your main battery accuracy. It's not even the whole picture. That's not necessarily going to be something that you as a player can noticeably feel on a battle-to-battle basis, but it will over time absolutely make a difference. It's one of those aspects of, I guess, psychology when it comes to games, where if you make lots and lots of really tiny incremental changes, when you're actually playing the game, it can almost feel like nothing's changed at all. But if you make the changes too big, then it can be too jarring in comparison. It can end up having the sort of same negative effect in players' minds. And so, you know, finding that happy medium is not the easiest thing. Talking of player psychology, I think Chaser is definitely of a mind to get up close and personal in this game. That's definitely been his goal from the very start, probably from when he saw what kind of matchmaking he was going to get. And the Eitel Friedrich at least does have the speed to go with it, and that, of course, I mean, I can't talk about it too much because we only just had them, the tier 4 and the tier 10 for preliminary testing when the whole shitstorm happened. But yeah, the German battlecruisers are of course on the horizon at this point and entering very early testing. But it's interesting to note that they're entering testing at the point when Soviet aircraft carriers are also in testing. So there's I think there's going to be a fair while before we actually get to see the battlecruisers in game. They seem to be stacking up a lot of stuff in testing at the moment. I won't talk about my experiences of playing the tier 4 and the tier 10 though. I mean, I only played a couple of games in the tier 4 and I actually hadn't gotten around to playing the tier 10, but we know some of the stats from them publicly anyway, and I can talk about those at least. They're going to be fast, they will actually have decent secondaries, but they're not going to necessarily have great armour, and so in that way, if you've played the Eitel Friedrich, you probably are going to have some idea of what to expect. They do seem to have looked at what they've done with the Eitel Friedrich and decided not to do any radical departures from that, because you sometimes get a premium that's released ahead of a line, and in this case, you know, the Eitel Friedrich has been in the game for a while now, and it ends up having a markedly different character than the tech tree ships do. But other times, you know, you get ships that fit in very well, and I think that's probably going to be the case this time. So it'll be a good captain trainer for that. An unfortunate torpedo hit there. He wasn't able to avoid taking that in the bow. He's down to one heel left now as well. So overall, this isn't super great. I mean, they've managed to avoid the crossfire situation generally, and the Anshan's probably the biggest threat right now. having taken the middle has also swung things back in their favour in terms of points, and they are now just ahead on ships as well. It's certainly helped by this rather complacent enemy New Mexico player, who not only is sitting stationary broadside, but also firing high explosive. This guy could be a considerably bigger threat to Chaser right now. The New Mexico's armour, especially when top tier, isn't actually half bad. But you actually have to angle. You have to do what this player isn't doing. So, yeah. With players like that on the enemy team, it's maybe not a wonder as to why things are turning around in this team's favour. Although it's still being pretty close overall. I mean, the Anshan just sunk the Ismail. And given that there is an island between them, you know, if Chaser does the risky thing and tries to well, chase them, that wasn't even a thing I thought of in advance, and I can only now apologise for it. That probably would have been rather a foolish endeavour. It would have been playing into the destroyer's hands. Anyway, let's see if we can finish off that new mechs, and the answer is yes, with a Citadel. These guns are capable of it, even though they are rather low caliber for a battleship. And that's his second kill as well, which is rather nice. The new mechs actually kind of gives you some idea of what these guns are like overall. I mean, the first two hits against the stationary broadside New Mexico only got, what, 5 or 6k damage between them, and then he managed a single salvo that had like double that. So they can be quite unreliable, especially without the main accuracy module. In a stroke of luck though, the Anshan pops up, has revealed their position by firing, and it looks for a moment as if they at least are going to get their revenge for Chaser killing them, but they just run out of range with the torps. I think it's only, what, 8km torps on the Anshan? So they didn't release them quite close enough. They almost had Chaser banged to rights there, but unfortunately for them and fortunately for Chaser, it was not to be. If he had been sunk though, and I don't think he really realised this based on what was being said in the chat, it still would have been fine for his team winning. I mean, they've only got that Bayern left. It's not going to escape anywhere. It's not going to be able to hide, especially, and it's now on very, very low health. So even if he had been sunk, this would have been fine, really. And it would have been, I suppose, mildly disappointing to Chaser, for Chaser to have not survived the game. But in this kind of situation, when you have won, then it's hard to be mad about it in the same way. But because he did survive and even managed to yoink that final kill, he actually got a Dreadnought out of that and a very respectable 118k damage done. Unfortunately, well, we'll see in a moment, despite the blaze of action we saw from his secondary guns, they're not actually going to account for that much of that damage. It was only about 29k out of that in total. So it was a nice little top up to what the main battery did, but the main battery was by far the star of the show there in terms of doing the bulk of the damage, even with the decreased accuracy. However, if you're going to go for a more bullish secondary build, tier 6 is probably a decent place to do it if you can manage to get yourself in a top tier game, just because you're not necessarily going to be insta-nuked the same way as if you tried to play that aggressively in a tier 10 game. It's certainly possible to have a tier 10 secondary build and be successful with it, and be very successful with it, but you have to employ a bit more caution overall about when and where to actually close to within secondary distance. So yeah, if you want to just bomb around and have fun, I think this is probably the better tier overall to do it. Hell, even like tier 5, the Oklahoma, would probably be an interesting one to try the new skill out on, which again I haven't actually done yet. I might do that myself as well. So that's it for this replay. Hopefully you have enjoyed this game, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.